I am Linda van Tilburg for National Security News. Several of the world's most advanced economies are meeting in Italy for the G7 summit. One of the issues on the table is having imposed massive sanctions on Russia. The G7 nations are said to be working on a scheme to pass interest earned from frozen assets to Ukraine. And joining me to discuss what Ukraine wants from the G7 is Mariia Zolkina, a Ukrainian political analyst. Hi, Mariia. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. Nice to see you.
So what does Ukraine want from the G7?
Ukraine basically wants kind of another step forward towards military and financial support of Ukraine, which has actually, the aid which significantly stopped after 7 months delayed when we had this case with the US aid. And as of now, Ukraine wants to make it sure that another portion, which is really needed on the eve of possible another Russia's attempt to break through the Ukrainian front line, will be secured. So basically G7 decision, not just on sanctions, but basically on another 50 billion euros, which can be loaned to Ukraine, is of critical importance now for Ukrainian government.
So what about the money from the frozen Russian assets? Do you think there's a chance that that might be approved?
Unfortunately, I don't see any positive dynamics. We are moving towards deeper discussion, let's say, about how and when it's possible to expropriate actually Russian frozen assets and give them to Ukraine in order to rebuild the country and to reimburse all the cost of the war, all the damages Russia was doing. But unfortunately, at this summit, we are not yet in a place, in a spot when this decision will be made. There are a number of political obstacles, not even legal one, but mainly political one. And for G7, for US, for France, for every Western partner of Ukraine, their tactics towards Russia is not just about bilateral relations with Russia. They think about correlations and possible effects of these decisions now imposed on Russia and Russian assets for other similar situations when it comes to different other governments. Because for Ukraine, it's just about Russian money. But for G7, it's about how China will behave with China's money in Europe, how Gulf countries will behave having some monies in Western banks. So they do not want to create the situation politically. They do not want to create a situation when somebody will be scared to keep their money in the Western financial system. And that's the main political obstacle, not even legal one, as I said.
Well, President Zelensky is there as well. So what do you think he would be saying? Because he's got, I think, meetings with President Joe Biden from the US.
President Zelensky has a whole package too, I would say, starting from meeting with Macron and Biden in Normandy during his Normandy trip to France, and followed right now by G7, and what is even more important for Ukraine, the Global Peace Summit this weekend as well. So basically for him, there are a number of tasks. First, of course, sanctions to prevent Russia to be able to circumvent sanctions. This is just ridiculous from both a political and legal point of view, that Russia has completely adjusted to how to survive under the sanctions regime due to the help of third countries, not just China, but many Western countries as well. For instance, there are pieces of news that Germany and France are against kind of ban an export of some kind of luxury goods to Belarus, despite everyone knows that this in particular luxury cars are going then to Russia. So there are tensions about this, but for President Zelensky is the critical point is to make Russia stop circumventing the sanctions with conscious or unconscious help of third countries to secure another significant portion of support to Ukraine, which will be directly invested in military aid of Ukraine. And for this reason, we're speaking about this possible 50 billion loan, possibly thanks to decision of G7. And the third, but last but not least, question is to secure the support to diplomatic stand of Ukraine when it comes to Global Peace Summit and for Ukraine peace formula as the main negotiation basis whenever the negotiations will start.
Okay, well, let's go to that peace summit, which is this weekend. There's a lot of countries there, but not Russia or China. They're not going to be there.
Ukraine was pushing hard to make China accept the invitation, but the preparation to the summit showed that we have problems. I mean, Ukrainian government has really problems with China. On the one hand, I would say that in Ukraine-centric picture of the world, the Chinese factor was severely undermined in terms of that China has its own position, its own opinion. They want to be a part of negotiation team, despite the negotiations are not happening yet. They want to secure their place at the negotiation table when the negotiations start. They want to be participant and shape the post-war security architecture in Europe after the Russia-Ukraine war. And they have their own vision how it should look like. And this so-called proposal on settlement of the crisis, of Ukrainian crisis, as actually they call it, is opposite in some aspects to what, not just what Ukraine wants, but towards what international law says to us. Like, for instance, about necessity to withdraw Russian forces from temporarily occupied territories. And China has actually tried to make number of countries from so-called, I don't like this definition, but so-called global south, try to prevent them from coming in order to make Chinese proposal on so-called peace formula still livable, let's say. Because in case Ukraine accumulates as many support from other regions beyond the West as possible, then all other alternative plans for peace will be actually disappearing incrementally from agenda at all. And this is not what China wants. That's why it's a big problem, not just that China is not coming, but that China is pushing its own agenda and does want Chinese plan to be on the agenda and to be negotiated. Russia was not supposed to be there at all. And just to explain the logic was just to prepare the international community, international discussion about the possible post-war settlement, to the fact that there are some pillars, and these pillars arise not just from Ukrainian position, but from the Statute of UN and from international law principles on territorial integrity, safety of the people, prosecution of war criminals, and number of other stuff. It's not about talking to Russia. It's about how the peace should be organized when the war is over. That's why the idea was to accumulate the support without participation of Russia, accumulate support around Ukraine's peace formula. But I think there are a number of unexpected outcomes, not just Chinese one, but basically another outcome which is not very comfortable for Ukrainian diplomacy is that in case you have many players at the table, many countries, many states included in the summit, you will have to decrease the level of your ambitions. And you will basically have to negotiate the common position. And of course, position of Ukraine significantly differs from countries in somewhere in Africa or Latin America or Chinese position. That's why I think that the level of ambitions will be really decreased after this summit, unfortunately for Ukrainian government.
True. So do you expect anything to happen at this peace summit that can push the peace process forward?
I expect that there will be no significant pushes forward to sustainable peace. But at the same time, I expect something which probably Ukrainian government didn't expect when pushing for organizing the summit. I think that number of Ukrainian partners even, I don't even speak about countries and states representing other regions of the world, they treat this summit just as the first summit, which must be followed by the second one or third one with participation of Russia. And here we find the significant contradiction between how Ukraine viewed this summit and its expected outcomes, and how it's considered and perceived by states which were going to participate there. So there is an increasing expectation that negotiations in some form should start in the next 6 months or 1 year, if not before, then after US elections. And this is something which divert from the official Ukrainian position, because Ukraine say that there is no sense yet to negotiate with Russia. There is no strategic compromise to play around. Basically, Russia is not going to withdraw from temporarily occupied territories. Ukraine is not being invited to NATO, which is of crucial importance, basically, to sustain the peace in case there are negotiations. Ukraine is not yet receiving that kind of security guarantees on a bilateral or multilateral level, which could possibly substitute the NATO membership to some extent, but we are not receiving those kind of guarantees. And that's why, if to compare the very idea of negotiations and what we can get as a result of this, the outcome of this negotiation, there is a gap, serious gap between. So there is no perspective for peace, and that's why I think this the position, the perspective of Ukraine. But when it comes to states which will participate in a global peace summit, I'm pretty sure they will have the perspective of the second and third summit as really negotiation platform.
So do you expect these other countries you were talking about, you were mentioning Latin America, you were mentioning Africa, these countries, some of them say they're neutral. Do you expect them to make any difference in these peace talks over the weekend?
I expect that they might, and they have actually tried to impact already the draft of the communiqué, the final communiqué, and the documents which were leaked to Ukrainian journalists. Basically, they are not very positive from Ukrainian point of view, exactly because in the draft versions there were proposals coming not from Ukraine but from someone else in the room to make a promise that the next summit in autumn will include Russia, and that the next summit should discuss not only Ukrainian peace formula but other proposals for the peace. And this is basically directly opposite to the interests of Ukraine. And the only thing that might change the situation positively for Ukraine, still to make a big piece of news, a positive news for Ukraine after this summit, if there will be either the first version of communique signed without mentioning of Russia invited to the next summit, or without alternative peace plans, because this will just make a situation completely like what we're talking about at all, what kind of peace proposals, or just to refuse from any final communique at all. Sometimes big diplomatic summits and big events, they're finished without any written communique, and this is fine. This is absolutely okay.
So which are these countries that is pushing for this other communique, or for the subsequent summits where Russia is included?
We don't know specifically who was the author of those, but we know that the Switzerland, as the country who is hosting the summit, is actually transmitting these ideas from other participants to Ukrainian side. So who is the author of these proposals? Probably we will know after the summit, basically, when we will hear comments from the representatives of these states on their own publicly. There will be lots of journalists at the summit. And if not authors of specific ideas with Russia, we can assume basically this is normal idea. This is acceptable idea for number of different states. So I wouldn't blame just someone right now, even to make a guess, because for African countries, for Latin American countries, even for Gulf countries, for Middle East countries and North Africa countries, it's completely understandable from their point of view idea that if we speak about the end of the war, we should invite Russia to the table as soon as possible. And this is what's not yet in place when it comes to Ukraine's foreign policy agenda.
Who do you think are behind these proposals to them? Is that a BRICS from BRICS or from China? Where would these alternative ideas come from?
We know a number of alternative ideas. They have appeared much earlier. This is the Chinese idea, the Chinese proposal on the settlement. There was a proposal from Brazil. There was a proposal from 5 African countries led by the South African Republic. There was Indonesia proposal. There was even Turkish proposal, much more moderate and less ambitious, but still. So the idea of Ukraine is not to divide the efforts between number of different proposals and to concentrate on Ukraine peace formula. The idea of Russia, for instance, is to have as many peace proposals as possible, because this will, of course, decrease the significance of Ukraine's position, make it just one in a row, not just the priority one. And another instrument how Russia might use the very idea of other proposals, Russia might, using these states or its relations with these states or some other instruments, they might make the Security Council of the UN consider or even vote for a number of the proposals, not just Ukrainian one, when this will be considered at the level of the UN. And when you have just 5 proposals instead of one, it means that you will have, at the very end of the day, you will have something very different from the original proposal, which was the Ukrainian one. That's the idea why Ukraine was insisting so much on Global Peace Summit to make its proposal the priority one. And this is actually why it is so hard, even at the summit, which was initiated by Ukraine, to get the outcome which is beneficial for Ukraine.
Mariia, Zolkina, thanks so much for speaking to us.
Thank you.